Good morning and welcome to the Leadership and Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Sten, who's CEO of Zego. Sten, good morning. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Excited to be here, Alex.
Good. Thank you very much. I said this before, but with some of your Zego has been a business that we've talked about quite a bit. The journey's been kind of very public and very exciting. But I always want to start from a position of ignorance. So rather than kind of assume everyone knows who Zego are, it'd be great if you could introduce the Zego business and what it is exactly you guys do.
Sure. Well, Zego is an insurance company focused on vehicles. So we insure from individuals all the way through to large enterprise fleets. And we insure from 1 minute all the way through to 1 year, and whatever works for the customer. And generally, we insure vehicles where vehicles are being used to earn money. And for example, we've got ride-hailing products, food delivery, parcel delivery, electric scooter rental schemes, and so forth. So wherever a vehicle is being used to earn money, this is our kind of a focus.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is a space that's kind of much more hotly contested now, but something you've been on the journey for a long time. It was very much kind of the USP at the beginning. What's been the evolution like of the business? And just to give some context, where did you start? Presumably you started as an MGA format in just one sort of very specific area, and then it's grown into a much bigger business now.
Yes. So we started 2016, and there was a very clear problem whereby food delivery companies weren't able to hire drivers quick enough. Mm-hmm. When you looked under the hood, you realized that the problem was insurance. So the pitch to all of these drivers back then was, come and work for me. I'll pay you per job. I can't guarantee your income. And I need to see your insurance certificate, which is like £1,400, $2,000 a year upfront, right? So we then thought naively, why can't you just do it based on units of work? So when you work, you pay. When you don't, you won't. We told lots of people, they said it's a great idea. We told lots of insurers, they said it's a terrible idea, until we found one who was willing to give it a go. So in 3.5 months, we went from an idea to launch. We got the insurer onboarded, we got regulated, and we built the product. And then day one, we had customers and been growing since then. So initially, it was very much a brokerage structure. Then it evolved into MGA structure. And we quickly realized in order to be able to build a hugely successful business, you also need your own insurance carrier. So we also have insurance carrier. So in general, we work with other insurance partners as well, but roughly around 20-25% of the risk is on our own balance sheet. So that also helps because we've got skin in the game, and we've got the infrastructure that you have to have as an insurance company. So there's very much an alignment of objectives, because MJs in insurance often have quite a kind of a not aligned objectives. And that's our model, and that's how we operate in like 5-6 European markets in Europe. Main market at the moment still is the UK.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How did it impact your relationship with your insurer partners when you said, right, we're going to go and launch our own balance sheet and accept our own risk? Presumably it could go in two directions. It could create some friction, and it could create some sort of shared risk thoughts on it. But I'm interested in how that relationship changed.
So even before we put an application in, the moment we had an idea that we wanted to do it, we told our partners. So I think it's very important to be upfront about it and about the objectives. And fundamentally, where it boils down to is when you raise a lot of venture capital money, and I use an analogy whereby you're building the nicest house you can, but if you do not control the power or internet that comes to the building, doesn't matter how nice house you have if you can't use it, right? If you don't have electricity, you can't use it. So hence the dependency is massive. And at the same time, having your own carrier requires a lot of regulatory capital. So we don't want to be doing necessarily, we want to optimize that as well. So we were very upfront. We told about it. We kept them in the loop, and we were very clear of the rules as well, what business goes on where. And that's not because one of the main concerns was on anti-selection. But if you actually program automatic kind of a risk distribution, then it won't be a problem. So we now work with some large A-rated insurers in multiple countries, and we got a long list of insurers who are very, very keen to work with us. So that model, they understand how it works. We've been very transparent about it, and yeah, it's worked well.
Yeah, transparency is that I ask a lot about partnerships, because I think, particularly the insurtech ecosystem is built on partnerships, and insurance is unusual. I think for many industries is that when I've worked in insurance for a long time, but I think when I first joined the industry, you're surprised how often you interact with, what would outwards looking in would be competitors. But there's lots of, insurance relationships across, whether it's reinsurance into insurance, whether it's some syndicated markets. There's so many opportunities to partner. And transparency and honesty and authenticity is the kind of themes of language that come up all the time. Because that's so core to the industry. I suppose it's probably core to any successful relationship. I wanted to ask you about Zego as a company gets talked around in numbers quite a lot, and unicorn is obviously an exciting title, but wanted to get an understanding of 5 different markets. What's the size and scale of the business now in terms of kind of people numbers and the markets you're in, and just to give that real context to the audience here?
Yes. There's only that much I can share about the numbers. I hope you appreciate. But we are in 6 markets. So UK, Ireland, France, Spain, Netherlands. And then we, sorry, there's actually 5, sorry. And then we do another 3 markets where we don't have necessarily an office presence, but we are doing business. So that's our presence at the moment. We are around 600 people. So we've grown the team a lot recently, and we build a lot of technology. Like I always say that we are a tech company that does insurance. So very much solving problems through technology, creating an underwriting an advantage through technology. So yeah, and we are growing double digits year on year. We what else?
How do you manage culture? Because 6 years ago you started this thing, and 3.5 months in you're sort of up and running, which is incredible. But your challenge is, I don't know, it's not holding on to culture, or like how do you keep that kind of startup feel when you start to become you're a pretty big business now? So how do you keep that kind of startup mentality going?
I mean, I would say, so I've been from day one with the business, and I would say that I've seen 7, 8 different Zegos, right? So the business constantly evolves. So if you're a team of 30 and you want to keep the same way of operating and same culture, you're not going to be successful when you're 200. So, but what is a common denominator across the board is the values that people live by. And this is something that is incredibly important to me. And so we have values, and one of the values is Zego before ego. And this is probably one of the most resonating one. And like, we first interview people, and we have a specific values stage in an interview process where you will be grilled at how well you're living up to Zego values. And these people are interviewing like from completely different parts of the business, have nothing to do with their job or a team they're going into. And there's a lot of kind of a passes there. So that's one of the way of doing it. Like, you have to, if you have like, I have a kind of allergic reaction to egos who are there to drive their own agenda. Like, no, there's no place whatsoever for these individuals at Zego. And then other values like take the wheel. You need to have the drive, take the initiative, and we validate on those. So whether you're 30, 200, 600, or 5,000, you need to be hiring based on those and holding those to high regard. We do performance reviews based on that, etc. Give kudos on values and so forth. So that is one way of doing it. Otherwise, I don't think you should try and hold on to like too much of the organizational size. The way you were doing things at 30 will break when you're 60, will break when you're 150. That's normal. And you're constantly have to like rebuild your processes, rebuild your ways of working. And that's okay. That only shows progress.
Yeah, so it's interesting what you said there. I think so many companies I talk to sort of try and hold on to those. We have to hold on to these, underpinning elements from 30, and exactly it breaks. But I think keeping hold of that culture and making that work is so important. But what was important to me there, and I think one of the things that I think people don't do as well, and this is, from being a headhunter, this is something I see, is you have the values and then you use them to screen people on the way in, but they're not kind of checked against as we go. And I think reviewing against that is so important, because what tends to happen is people get reviewed against that. Oh, they're a high performer, but they're not sticking to the cultural values, and nothing really happens. And I think that's a really toxic environment that gets created. So it's so important.
People do not manage necessarily performance. So like, I think the trickiest one is like so-called smart assholes, like very good at the job, exceptional delivery, but incredibly difficult to work with. And I think it's like, when, let's say on scale 1 to 10, if you've got 9 or 10 performers, it's a no-brainer. If you've got like 1 to 3, it's a no-brainer what you need to do. But if you've got 5, 6, 7, it's very tricky, right? And I think quite a few people fall in that category, but I think you just have to apply the same approach. It's what's best for the business, and that's the one single question I ask constantly in my head is, what's best for the business? If best for the business is for me not to be the CEO, then that's best for the business, and I will accept that, right? So, and I'd expect this from every single employee, including shareholders, and hopefully, well, that has worked so far well. Hopefully it will work in the future as well.
Yeah. No, but not everyone's got a snappy Zego before ego.
I know. You can't say that like, Zego before AXA or Zego before Allianz. It doesn't rhyme that well, right?
I was like, can I get that into mine? Ego doesn't quite work. I'll work on it. I'll think of it.
Yeah.
But thank you for that, and that's super helpful. And I just it's such an interesting business. I want to get to that, because the reason we reached out and coordinated this was we were fascinated to see that you launched your vision of 2040, which is a great. I'll put a link in the show notes in case anyone haven't, but. Zego did this piece of work that came out with your vision of what 2040 would look like, and it was much broader than just insurance. It was much more about sort of the genuinely about mobility and food delivery and all the working, the sort of environment that we were going to be in 2040. So we'll put it in the link. Everyone should go and look at it. Why do you think it's important for insurance companies to have a kind of future view that is broad enough to encapsulate the wider world? I think people say, what's our business going to look like in 2040 and what's the insurance environment in 2040, but you guys went further than that and just said, what do we think the world's going to look like in 2040? Why was that important to do?
Sure. I'm pleased you like that, because we put a good amount of work into really thinking through the details. When you actually take a moment, we have a Google View style where you can move around, zoom in and out feature on there, and we really wanted to make it real and also what is feasible. So, and there's a lot of attention to detail in this whole world, and it is literally outside the Lloyd's of London building, and you can kind of see and imagine yourself how the world works. So the reason we did it was insurance is quite an intangible part of a supply chain or value chain. So, I mean, I think the closest analogy I would use is AWS, Amazon Web Services. You turn them off, half the websites disappear off the planet, right? So they are like the tide riser, essentially. You never see them, never present. You're interacting with like websites, experiences, but they do exist and power all of it. And insurance has, in my opinion, the same role to play. So therefore, how do you then inspire people working in insurance and also understand the impact they are having for the rest of the world? And we wanted to paint this picture, be like, okay, this is how the 2040 could look like based on technologies available, being developed, and so forth. And we, like Zego, let's say if Zego is hugely successful business, that still is like 1% of contribution bringing that future to life. So it's a requirement for hundreds of thousands of companies, big and small, at different parts, be it manufacturing, be it like, infrastructure, all of that coming together, making this future a reality. And I think when you visualize things, it becomes a lot more understood. If I tell you autonomous vehicle, probably what's on your mind and my mind are very different autonomous vehicles. By putting it visually drawn up, we both understand. So, and there's an element of like, hey, insurance is actually a very key part of this whole thing. Let's inspire the people in the industry, and also let's envisage how the future could look like, that we all have a role to play today to enable it. And I think, sorry, my final quick point, the very tangible element is like, take the electric scooters. When these came about, insurance companies quoted them traditional annual car prices. Just doesn't work, right? Yes. So we were very much like, okay, let's do it by the minute, and when the vehicle is being used and so forth. So I think it's our responsibility to design insurance products for new types of modes of transport, because if we do not do that, that's holding innovation back. Yeah, no, completely understand that. Yeah. I suppose one of the things that's outside the industry's control to a certain extent, or maybe it isn't, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, because it's something that you would have had experience of, is the part regulation has to play. A lot of this, a lot of the part of this vision I was looking at was going, well, the only thing that's going to get in the way there is regulation issues. I suppose, what part can the insurance industry do to help that vision become a reality from a sort of regulation standpoint? Yes, I think regulation is the final, call it, signature or approval. But in order for this to be easily granted, all the other parts have to make sense and come together. So if insurance companies are uncomfortable taking on any type of risk that comes from autonomous vehicles, they have not designed the products for them. Regulators are more reluctant to approve it. So if insurance companies are designing products meant for these types of vehicles, work with the relevant manufacturers and operators, then they together can go like, hey, Mr. Regulator, do not worry. We got vehicles, we got cyber insurance here, we got software insurance, we got hardware insurance. The vehicle has been tested X million miles, and this is how it works, right? That gives the comfort and safety to be like, you know what, let's give it a go. So I think we need to be fundamentally, I think the biggest shift is going from insurance industry from a mindset of being reactive to going to proactive. Because insurance often responds to like issues and always looks historic data. But how do you, I think the key shift here is become proactive, be part of those conversations, and then take it from there. That is the key part, in my opinion. I think that will probably, this next question leans into that quite heavily. I think, we've seen autonomous vehicles are a very complex risk. They're very complex in terms of kind of the engagement. And we've seen the rise of kind of some of the conversation about internal risk solutions, such as like Mercedes announcing its own insurance for autonomous vehicles. What does this mean for insurance to stay relevant? Because do we risk, what's to stop these autonomous vehicle makers raising a balance sheet, doing the internal insurance? I know we could argue that they need that knowledge base, but I suppose there's a risk there. So sort of building on from the previous answer you gave, how do we continue to remain relevant? Presumably it's about partnerships and engaging at an earlier point of the value chain of these kind of innovations outside of insurance. Yeah, I think there is a few lenses. So first of all, it depends what role you're playing. So those large OEMs, they have to develop some of those insurance models, because in order to get traction, take Tesla, for example, they developed end-to-end stack, including batteries and everything else, in order to get more momentum for electric vehicles, charging stations and so forth. If they hadn't done that, I think the evolution of electric vehicles would have been significantly slower, counting on other partners to move at pace. Now, well, they are very happy to buy batteries from all other companies. They even like shared their patents, like go everyone else like produce batteries, because they're going to be needing them as much as everyone else. So I think my logic to the OEMs is that they have to do it in order to get going. But take, I don't know, Volkswagen, for example. Imagine if they were to insure every single vehicle themselves. The balance sheet risk is like huge. I do not know. They're going to need like 50 reinsurers behind it, at least. And at the same time, there's a massive exposure in case, let's say, things happen. Because let's say softwares or hardwares, they can break. And often if it happens, it rains, right? So it happens in one go. So you really have to think of the largest exposures you have any given time. And I think therefore, from insurance point of view, like great example, take an airplane, like there's 160 seats, but really any reinsurer is taking 6 seats. So taking 6 seats in any like multiple dozens and dozens of planes, that's how they kind of pool the risk. So if you're all in with Volkswagen, for example, and Volkswagen themselves are all in, it's very risky. So I think they have to be divvying up from a balance sheet point of view, the risk. Then the second element is your like delivery of the product, the customer and technology behind it. I think if there is companies who purely focus on that, then there's a great opportunity there as well. So I think that my view is you have to get going, you have to get traction, and then you have to pool it, because it just gets into trillions very quickly.
Yeah, very true. This is blending away from pure insurance question now. So give me some artistic license here, Sten, if you would be so kind. But this sort of, I'm a bit of a film nerd, so I love seeing this vision of future. But I was like, this isn't necessarily new. This is like Blade Runner came out in the 80s, and then this feels more, it feels almost like a Blade Runner vision. But what I thought was interesting, but that does feel tangible now. You know, you're not putting things here that aren't realistic. You know, flying drone delivery, you know, food services that utilize unused, you know, tops of buildings, for example, and you know, like charging in the streets. It's not, but it's interesting how far that is from the ACES landscape we've looked at. But I wanted to ask you about, you know, do you think tech is catching up with culture in the way that we envisage the future? And I suppose broadly, how important do you think art and culture are to innovation?
Yeah, I'm pleased you referenced that it's realistic. That was one of the objectives, because if it's not realistic, if it's too sci-fi, then you're just not going to buy it. And therefore we took the kind of real buildings, real world, real streets, and let's just assume like that is now autonomous and like fully mobility is enabled through technology. So I'm pleased it's landed well. In terms of art and culture, it's a good one. I think they do have to, like, imagine if the vehicles looked very boring and boxy, and you know, that would be boring. That would be not attractive to jump in those vehicles and experience that. And I think at the same time, it needs to be very practical. So in order to, they always say like building great simple stuff takes time and a lot of thought. So I think a lot of creativity needs to go into building these vehicles and like street layouts and street structures. So I think it has a key role to play. And you can make some very pretty and practical vehicles if you are using inspiration from other industries. So Yeah, even to the point, like one of the scenarios we planned there was, how does a lunch market look like? Right. So you've got robots coming, driving for your lunch, and then they go. How do you structure them? How they enter? I mean, how easy it is to purchase stuff on back of them. All of that, right? And you could put a lot of great thought into building some exceptional experiences.
It's interesting how if you look at electric vehicles that are out today, I was thinking that, and there's a few. I live in Brighton, and you know, I suppose there's elements that are quite wealthy, so there's lots of first movers as well. But it's interesting how different most electric vehicles look to most other cars, and it says something about the first mover. You know, like most people they're not the first movers, but they're fairly early innovators on that scale that are buying these cars. So it's interesting that they're so different, and I think it ties into the people that want these probably do think slightly differently and have engaged with it. So the idea that they would just look like any other car, which is I think where they started, very quickly it's been like the most successful ones we see now probably do look a bit different. So
yeah, I think like when you look at the traditional OEMs, they've first solved the problem of like take petrol engine, turn it into a electric one. So the vehicle hasn't necessarily changed in terms of the user experience in the vehicle. Whereas the ones who build it from scratch end to end, this materially has changed the vehicle look and feel. Even in our future, you'll see that we've got standing pods and like two-person vehicles and one-person vehicle and so forth. Why? Well, and they're thin, very thin in terms of structures as well, because you're not going to crash into anyone, which means that you're not going to be needing that kind of metal armor around you. So therefore, you can design a whole different set of vehicles that are moving in close proximity, but they're not going to crash into each other. So I think the whole world opens up in terms of what does a great experience in a vehicle will look like in the future.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think about we think the future of work's been talked about a lot. Pandemics led to kind of remote working in a way that we haven't seen before. You tally those things as well, like people will be traveling slightly less, you would imagine, or would like to think so. I can't wait for future where I'm getting in a car and it drives me into London, and especially if I'm on my own. I'm quite antisocial really when I travel, so if you give me a solo vehicle, I'm in it. As long as I, fire up
the things that have not yet solved. So maybe that's for listeners as well, if they got any ideas. Is I think in this world when you've got fully autonomous vehicles, the vehicles won't park anywhere, so the consoles don't get any parking income, right? And then also parking fines. Right, they won't park, so you can't fine anyone. So there's a big chunk of income that's being lost in this new structure. So how do you solve for that income? And then secondly, I think what we've seen in the US as well with the autonomous vehicle out there, when they see an autonomous vehicle coming, the pedestrians, they just cross the street. They don't care. They know that vehicle is going to stop. Now, imagine it's fully autonomous. Everyone's going to cross roads everywhere. Now, if that happens, then the traffic doesn't flow. So that's a problem. So how do you then set expectations with pedestrians where and how they should cross the streets? Will they start getting fines? Is that where you get your parking fines back if they cross at the wrong places, wrong times, right? So there's a few like practical problems to solve, even from a point of view like consoles income or some other things when the world evolves. But some exciting problems to solve.
That's a really good point about the crossing of the road for pedestrians, and it's I mentioned this year I've just been in New York for ITI for a week, and every time I'm in America, because I'm from just outside of London, I'm so used to crossing the road wherever I like. I've always thought jaywalking was the most ridiculous fine, but basically what you're telling me now is autonomous vehicles are going to make jaywalking a very logical fine.
Yes, exactly. But then if you do it, like I'm sure we've been at those zebra crossings where people just keep coming and coming and coming and coming, you can't try, right? So that doesn't work in that world. Then everyone is just sitting in the vehicles and commute is like 2 times longer. So I think we are solving some problems, we are creating the others, but that's normal. That's with innovation, right? So you have to solve these problems as well.
We can't talk about electric vehicles, I don't think, without talking about the fossil fuel industry. And I'm conscious I'm bringing this in quite late. This is a very big problem to solve. But I did, do you think as an industry, insurance should be doing more to encourage people to move away from fossil fuels? Because arguably, if it can't be insured, it would stop. It would not be used. So there's been a few people that are trying to solve this problem, but do you think we're seeing enough movements to, as an industry, for us to be proactively trying to help fossil fuels stop?
Yeah, I think as my early example of being the tide riser, it's we have a role to play for sure, right? And if I think it was a couple of years ago when electric cars were, I don't know, 20% more expensive in terms of insurance policies because they were a lot more expensive to repair and everything else, then that doesn't necessarily help. But at the same time, insurance is insurance, mortgages, lending. They're very much on the same category, whereby it's all about charging a customer 100 and making sure that you pay out no more than 100. Right. So if you pay out more than 100, then it's kind of the bigger you get, the worse it gets. So it's important that you objectively look at the numbers and insure the risk where you can. The way I think about what the insurance companies should do is focus on the claims handling, focus on the supply chain networks, and push hard on that side, making sure that the garages know how to fix electric vehicles, making sure the parts are there on time. All of those elements, that's how you giving replacement vehicles out, giving electric vehicles instead of petrol vehicles, for example, to the customers. All of those things I think insurance companies can do, because that will then overall reduce the cost of the repairs, cost of claims, which then reduces premiums, which then encourages more customers to buy electric vehicles. I think one of the obstacles is you run a quote for your Tesla and also equivalent petrol car in terms of price, and the insurance comes out cheaper on petrol. So that should not be the case. I think if it does in practice, then it's the role of insurance companies work with their claims and supply networks to make sure that at least equivalent is achieved in the near term, and even significant kind of reductions in the long term. And that's how we can help.
Incentivizing through action.
Yes.
Yeah. Just on claims quickly. I'm surprised, personally, been surprised that we haven't seen more investments in claims technology. Because we talk quite often about putting the customer first, and to a large extent the customer's first experience with an insurance company, or certainly how they judge insurance companies when they have a claim. Are you surprised we haven't seen more pure investments in insurtech from a claims perspective, or is it because it's being built internally by companies that are digital first, like Zego? Would you say?
Yeah, their claims is an interesting part from a technology point of view. On a surface level, it's really about kind of workflow management, and there's so many workflow tools out there that you can implement and customize. But that's not really what makes successful claims. The key part is the fraud detection, the predictiveness of claims, the accuracy of claims information itself in first place about the claim. So claims is the place where all of the kind of up the stack technologies come together. Let's say if you were to get GPS location of the customer, that's a great validation of claim accuracy, fraud, multiple other things. So I think a lot of the technology sits above, but it all is being used in a claim, or needs to be used in a claim. And then the second part of a claim element is the repair networks. Which is all about kind of relationships, contracts, SLAs, all that. And that's all about kind of operational process management. So, and then in order to develop a software and sell it, it would need to be sold to large insurance companies. So you really have maybe like, I don't know, 500 customers in your customer target list across the world, let's say. And the implementation periods, I spoke to one large insurer, they're implementing a new claims workflow management tool. It's a 2.5-year project. So from a VC point of view, you're investing money, your sales cycles are super long, and the customer target, your target addressable market is relatively small. So I think that's one of the main reasons. And then the other thing is like insurance companies do want to own claims. This is the last part that they're willing to kind of have others kind of have a take on. So therefore there's a lot more internal focus. But I do see that there's a pockets of software that's being developed to help in this workflow that can be linked up, certain fraud detection, certain image recognition, certain workflow management tools and so forth. So
and it's interesting the way that you position the business as a technology business that does insurance, and I think you then look at all of these different tools that can be bought as a separate entities. And I was just thinking, as you were saying it, then it becomes the job of the insurer to choose the best ones of those that are going to deliver the best customer experience, and then the skill is almost in sewing them together so the experience is kind of unique and world class.
Yes, I think that is the you might notice I'm using a lot of analogies. So I think the key thing is the insurance company tech stack is like a fake Christmas tree, whereby you buy the kind of a main kind of a branch, and then you've got dozens and dozens of branches coming off that tree, and that's how it looks great. The insurance company has to own and build the main kind of a branch, and then hook into different type of software where it's applicable or relevant to that main core branch. Now, at the moment, when you look at a lot of insurance companies, either the branch is like super old and irrelevant, so hooking anything onto there, it's almost impossible. And secondly, in a lot of cases, they don't actually own it in first place. So insurance software houses are really owning them, controlling them, and they've got no incentive to kind of improve. The more complex and structured it is, the better for them. So therefore, those two, from our point of view, it's all like we are kind of driving all of that platform and building that platform. And then depending on kind of a requirement to build versus buying it, we make the decisions there.
Brilliant. Well, Sten, I'm really conscious of your time. I know we've got a hard stop, but before I let you go, are you up for a few more fun quick fire questions?
Yes, let's do it.
Well, we're talking about future, so I just wanted to talk about sci-fi. So are you Star Trek or are you Star Wars?
I think I'm Star Trek because the element of reality there, like we did in Future 2040. Sci-fi is too hard of a push for me.
Yeah. And so if we took a negative view of the sci-fi future, do you want to live in a Terminator world or do you want to live in a Matrix world?
Terminator world, yes.
I agree. Matrix world looks harrowing. Terminator,
yes.
Feels like there's a chance there.
Yes.
And then bring it more realistic. Are you Team Blue Origin or Team SpaceX?
That's a hard one. I do love what Jeff Bezos has built with Amazon, but between the two, it's SpaceX.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I will leave it there. I really appreciate you taking the time. The most contentious question of the day will be Star Trek versus Star Wars, no doubt.
Probably. I'm going to get many messages about it afterwards.
Yeah, I know. That's the sad truth. We've talked about a lot of good stuff, and we'll probably get more stick for those. But yeah, thank you so much for being for coming on and being a guest, and thank you to the business for thinking about 2040. I think it's really impressive that you put forward a vision that people can engage with and challenge and see how you think about it. Because I think it's hugely important for every industry, but particularly insurance. I think we've been very guilty of acting on as now and reacting. And I think, being proactive is, when we see the sort of growing risks, it's so important that we do it. And we're starting to see that happen now. And it's where the most exciting innovation is happening. So yeah, thank you once again for being a great guest on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been great fun, and look forward to the future ones.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.